This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
U.S. House Committee says Boeing to blame for Ethiopia and Indonesia plane crashes that killed over 300 people. Leaders from regional bloc ECOWAS and Mali's military junta failed to agree on the country's political transition. And Egypt to carry out clinical trials on a potential COVID-19 vaccine developed by a Chinese company. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live from Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Tonight I'm alongside Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Computer component makers around the world stand to lose billions of dollars due to China-US trade tensions. And passenger train services resume amid intensified COVID-19 regulations in Nigeria. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. Let's begin. An 18-month inquiry has found that 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes were a culmination of a series of horrific failures by Boeing and the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. A U.S. House panel released its highly critical report on Wednesday. The report said there were faulty technical issues in Boeing's engineering, a lack of transparency on the part of Boeing's management, and insufficient oversight by regulators, the FAA. U.S. lawmakers have proposed numerous reforms to restructure how the FAA oversees aircraft certification. In 2018 and 2019, 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes killed all 346 passengers and crew aboard. The incidents forced aerospace firm to ground all their 737 MAX planes in March last year. All right, Jim Spellman joins me now from Washington, and Gerum Chala is live from Addis Ababa. I'd like to thank both of you for joining us here on Africa Live. Let me begin with you, Jim. Jim, the findings of the U.S. House panel are quite telling about Boeing safety standards. What more can you tell us about this?
This is really a stunning report to read, and you're left with one conclusion: that these accidents did not have to happen. This House Democrats report finds that it was a combination of technical errors, mismanagement at Boeing, and lax oversight by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration that led to these crashes. Essentially, Boeing putting profits ahead of safety, largely in their efforts to compete with Airbus, that led them to trying to develop these aircraft too cheaply and too quickly. It also condemns the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration for being too cozy with Boeing, for giving Boeing too big of a voice in its own safety precautions. Now, Boeing is reacting to this report, saying they've learned lessons from it and that they fully cooperated. And the FAA says that they will work with Congress to implement recommended changes. Richard?
All right, Jim, don't go away. We have a few more questions we'd like to ask you, but I'd like to get Gerum Chala into this conversation. He's speaking to us from Addis Ababa. Gerum, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. My question to you is about the families. Families of those affected by the Ethiopian Airlines plane crash have been seeking justice. What is the outcome of the U.S. House panel report likely to mean for them?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, that accident has been devastating for these families, as you might understand, and they have been seeking justice, as we've been saying, for the last few months, and hiring lawyers and something like that. But now that this report came out, and we tried to speak to some of the families here in Addis Ababa, families of flight attendants and even crew, that this is really a positive, exciting news for them, because the blame has been going back and forth, saying that Boeing has nothing to do with this. It was a failure from a pilot side. Ethiopian Airlines has been doing X and Y and that's why the crash accident happened. At the end of the day, now that the report came out, clearly indicating that this was not necessarily an accident, but a failure from the manufacturer side and also from the regulator FAA, it was indeed an exciting news and also a relief, by the way, for Ethiopian Airlines itself. So these people are now seeing light at the end of the tunnel, who the families of the victims, that justice finally is going to be served and is going to be done quickly.
All right, Gerum, thank you for bringing all of that there to light. I'll be back with you with just one more question. Let's toss it right back to Jim Spellman in Washington. Jim, with all that has been said, will the conclusions by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee make Boeing more liable to compensation claims? From your perspective, how do you see it?
Oh, absolutely. And as you heard Groom-Chala there say, this report makes it almost impossible for Boeing to claim that this was simply pilot error or anything along those lines, because they find these failures to be so systemic. It will be very hard for them, if the cases actually make it to a trial in front of a jury, to argue that they did not see the possibility of crashes like this. One thing to keep in mind here is that as this report is being put together, Boeing has been working on the MAX series jets, working on a flight control system as well as new training procedures for the pilots. And it's very likely that these planes could be back in the air, at least in the United States and in Europe, by winter time. Some of the families, some of the litigants in these lawsuits say it's not enough that they are ultimately compensated. They want all of this material to be made public so that independent experts can go over the safety data before these planes are allowed to go back in the air. So it's not just an issue of compensation, it's really an issue of trust. And I think it's clear that the families of the victims of these crashes don't have trust in either Boeing or in the FAA. Richard?
All right, Jim, thanks for shining light on all of that. And it's right back to you, Gerum-Chala. Gerum, should we expect Ethiopia Airlines to reevaluate its business relations with Boeing in the coming days?
Well, Richard, first of all, one needs to understand the fact that Ethiopian Airlines has a much larger relationship, bigger relationship with Boeing. As you know, perhaps 80–90% of its fleet of planes come from Boeing, including the 787 Dreamliner state-of-the-art airplanes, and including the MAX plane that has crashed. So to really reevaluate its relationship with Boeing, it also needs to reconsider all of these factors working together with the manufacturer for a long time. But one thing is for certain, and this is according to the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines, Tewolde ገብረማርያም, once. He said that when it comes to our orders for Boeing, we need to rethink our decisions. It's not going to be business as usual, because safety is always a priority when it comes to us delivering service to our customers, and we will never want to see the same kind of accident happen because of the plane failure. So yes, there might be a reevaluation, but this time around it's not going to be how do we engage with Boeing, should we stop it or not, because of the factor that I was talking about, of the long-term relationship that the airline has with Boeing. But then again, it's very vital for Ethiopian Airlines to reconsider its decisions, including the orders, by the way, it has of hundreds of millions of dollars of orders of planes it has with Boeing. So before they were perhaps taking things as business as usual, but this time around it's going to be a different case. At least they will think twice before ordering or receiving planes, Richard.
All right, Gerum-Chala, Jim Spellman, thank you for speaking to us. We really appreciate your insights. Moving on, leaders of the Economic Community of West African States have failed to reach an agreement with Malian military leaders over a transitional government. ECOWAS have been meeting in Ghana with the head of the military group that overthrew President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to persuade them to agree to their proposal. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports.
A gathering of leaders of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, in Ghana's Peduase Presidential Lodge. The meeting comes after Colonel Assimi Goïta, who led a coup in Mali last month, failed to meet the deadline set by ECOWAS to select a civilian leader to head the transition. An agreement was not reached with the army junta to hand over to a civilian government, but ECOWAS leaders say their message is clear.
We have been able to reaffirm the positions of ECOWAS. We need a civilian leadership of the transition, and we've also made it clear that the minute that leadership is put in place through the processes that they themselves have agreed on in Mali, the sanctions that have been placed against Mali will be lifted by ECOWAS.
Mediators have, however, agreed to a request from the army leader to consult with his team in Mali and then respond to their request within a week. 12 leaders out of the 15 ECOWAS countries attended the summit, and there's been a tense atmosphere at times. With no consensus reached at this ECOWAS meeting on handing over power to a civilian leader, some experts say the situation in Mali could affect regional security.
The fear is some of these Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliated groups will take advantage of the confusion and establish stronger footholds in the area. The possibility that whatever is happening in Mali will spill over to other countries is extremely real, because we've had multiple reported cases of cross-border attacks from Mali into Niger, and it's been successful.
After the coup, ECOWAS sanctioned Mali by shutting all its borders to the country and also cut financial transfers. While ECOWAS leaders wait to hear from Mali's military leadership on their proposal, they've not said what further actions they will take if he does not agree to hand over power to a civilian government. But the regional bloc could apply tougher sanctions against Mali if the country fails to return to civilian rule. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, Pediasi Presidential Lodge, Ghana.
Well, the West African leaders have agreed to an 18-month period for a transitional government in Mali. They, however, insist the government must be led by a civilian and not the military, something the military junta in that country had been pushing for. This was part of the decision reached at an extraordinary summit between ECOWAS leaders and leadership of the Mali military junta in Ghana. Here is Deji Badmus with the rest of the story.
The decision is some sort of concession by the ECOWAS leaders who had given the Malian military regime a September 15 deadline to announce a civilian-led transition government that would usher the country to a new democratic governance in 1 year. But the West African leaders insist both the transition president and prime minister, who must be civilians, should be appointed immediately, and that the military junta would stand dissolved immediately that happens.
The position of the ECOWAS heads of states is very clear, the authority of the heads of state, namely that the principle is that the ECOWAS would not accept change of government by force. So I think it's been basically very fruitful, and I think that all of the heads of state there was consensus. And that I think is very helpful, that the authority of heads of state is speaking with one voice, and that ECOWAS is at one on the most fundamental questions of democracy and good governance.
A move by the ECOWAS to insist that it has to be a civilian leadership heading the transition committee, which is the right thing in the first place, it would appear that a spanner has been thrown in the works of the military junta. So that is the situation where we find ourselves. But I think the junta is under very serious pressure at this particular point in time.
It's not yet clear what the junta intends to do next, but the ECOWAS made it clear sanctions will remain in place until the civilian-led transition government is inaugurated.
The military junta, I think they will find it difficult to. The best part for them is to be the part of retreat, look for a way to save face, get themselves involved in the transition government, but as members of the transitional unit or committee, not as a body that will help the transitional committee. That is not going to be possible. That will be very, very difficult.
Another headache for the junta would be how to handle their once ally, the influential opposition M5 RFP, which is also insisting any transitional government must be civilian-led.
All ECOWAS needs to do is to ratchet up the pressure and ensure that they do not give them a breathing space. They don't have much in terms of maneuvering to do. So I see them ultimately giving in because of the overwhelming pressure that is coming from every side. Perhaps if they had the people on their side, the Malian people on their side, they would have been able to withstand the kind of pressure that they are facing. But the fact that the people have also aligned with ECOWAS, it makes it more difficult for them.
For now, fingers are crossed over what course of action the Malian junta would take next. But with severe pressure mounting on them both at home and outside, they appear to have very little room to maneuver. CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Egypt to carry out clinical trials on a potential COVID-19 vaccine developed by a Chinese company.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Chinese President Xi Jinping, also General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, on Wednesday inspected central China's Hunan province in the village of Xiaozhou, Rucheng County. Xi visited places including a revolution-themed exhibition hall, a village service center, a clinic, a modern agricultural tourism demonstration base, a primary school, and the homes of villagers. She learned about education on the history of revolution, poverty relief industries, and progress in consolidating poverty eradication. And now to our continuing coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. The Egyptian Prime Minister of Health, Hala Zaid, says Egypt will carry out clinical trials on a potential COVID-19 vaccine. The trials are based on an agreement signed with China. The vaccine candidate used for the trials was developed by Chinese company Sinopharm, CNBG. Yasser Hakim has more details.
The process has begun this week. Egypt needs 6,000 eligible people to complete clinical testing over 60 days. It's the first time that Egypt assists in such clinical trials for the coronavirus.
China and Egypt have very good relations. It is a comprehensive strategic partnership, and we have very good cooperation in many fields, including in the health field and in the medical field. This is a very, very good time for us to give each other help and to confront this and to fight this COVID-19 shoulder to shoulder.
Egypt is conducting the third phase of the clinical trials. The vaccine has passed the first 2 trials successfully. Each volunteer will receive 2 injections with 21 days in between each.
After the trials and analysis, the vaccine will then go into production. According to the Ministry of Health, Egypt will then receive a license to produce the vaccine in its Vasera facilities.
When it is available, when it is developed, it will be shared with Egyptian friends. And Egypt, of course, has good capability in medicine and in the health field. President Xi Jinping has announced that we'll make the vaccine a public good and make it accessible and affordable to all the populations, and especially, of course, I think to the friendly countries and to friendly Egypt.
Cairo is attempting to provide as many COVID-19 vaccines as possible to its 100 million population. Priority will be to the elderly, the sick, and frontline workers.
Egypt is working on several sides to secure as many vaccines as possible. On the one hand, it has cooperated with companies that are testing vaccines so they can supply her later. On the other hand, Egypt is closing deals to import vaccines from different countries.
The health minister actually just announced she has signed an MOU to receive 30 million vaccines from the World Health Organization. However, for Cairo, the main partner to work with and become the major supplier is China. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Uganda has launched a clinical trial involving the use of convalescent plasma to treat COVID-19 patients. Convalescent plasma therapy involves taking blood from a recovered COVID-19 patient and injecting it into someone who's currently ill. The blood carries antibodies which could help the sick fight off the viral infection. As CGTN's Michael Baleke reports, let's take a look.
Uganda's health ministry says administering blood plasma therapy will speed up the recovery of COVID-19 patients. The treatment comes at a time when the country is registering a spike in cases.
COVID-19 has no treatment. What is given currently is supportive. So having convalescent plasma come on board is great, and we are looking forward to it being started tomorrow.
Figures from the Ministry of Health show, on average, Uganda registers 2 to 3 deaths per day from COVID-19. And this number is expected to rise as total infections jump past the 5,000 mark. This is forcing health authorities to explore different options like blood plasma therapy.
What we are doing is we are getting these antibodies from healed people and give them to this person who have not yet made his own antibodies and neutralize the virus in real time. And where some studies have been done, there is dramatic improvement in symptoms when these antibodies are given.
Convalescent plasma has been trialed as a therapy in coronavirus outbreaks in countries like the United States, India, South Africa, and they have reported improvements in patients. Health authorities here say initial trials show plasma therapy is safe and has proved to be effective in the treatment of COVID-19 patients. But scientists argue more research is required to prove its full efficacy. Medical researchers in Uganda working on the project say getting survivors of COVID-19 who are willing to sign up and donate blood is a challenge.
To treat one person, we need 2 donors right now with the methods that we have, because our methods we are using now is the traditional way of collecting blood, separate out plasma. Now there are advanced technology which if we got, one person would treat one person, because that technology, when you take out only the plasma. The rest of the things you put them back.
Other anticipated risks include survivors having secondary infections like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, or HIV, among others. Recovered COVID-19 patients will be required to contact a blood bank or a nearby hospital that treats COVID patients to donate the plasma, which could potentially save lives. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
COVID-19 cases in Africa have surpassed 1.3 million cases. According to the Africa CDC, the death toll stands at more than 33,000 with over 1 million recoveries. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila listing the countries with the highest and lowest number of cases.
The 5 countries that have consistently had the highest number of cases since the virus was first detected on the continent are South Africa, with more than 650,000 cases as of September 15th, followed by Egypt with just over 100,000 cases, Morocco 88,000 cases, Ethiopia 64,000 cases, and Nigeria rounding off the top 5 with 56,000 cases. South Africa, the country with the highest number of cases, has also tested more people than any other country on the continent, with close to 4 million tests to date. At the other end of the spectrum, The countries with the least number of confirmed cases are Seychelles with 140 confirmed cases, followed by Mauritius and Eritrea, both with just over 360 cases, Comoros 450 plus cases, and Burundi with a touch over 470 cases.
Schools in South Sudan were closed due to the coronavirus pandemic, but will reopen this week. The country is being urged to use the opportunity of reopening learning institutions to encourage 70% of the country's children who are out of school to enroll in formal education. CGTN's Patrick Oyed reports.
6 months of school closures due to coronavirus are coming to an end in South Sudan. The government says the pandemic is now at a manageable level and schools should open across the country.
We have successfully fought COVID-19 pandemic. And South Sudan is one of the best countries now all over the world in which this pandemic is not that serious.
Non-governmental organizations working to support children in South Sudan are welcoming the reopening of schools.
While we talk about school reopening, it's actually important that not only the 2.2 million children who are out of school, but that we should now focus on getting all the children who are eligible to go to schools to register.
Health experts are advising the Ministry of Education to put in place coronavirus preventive measures before reopening schools. However, some learning institutions such as the University of Juba have already been open since Monday.
Staying at home, people are getting married, some are just staying without job, we have been sleeping. We are happy to resume.
We thank our government for the opening of the school, and we are very, very happy about it. These weeks, these months, we already suffer a lot. We suffer, we stay at home, and we are not studying. So it's a good chance to be back at the school.
Save the Children is urging other aid agencies supporting education in South Sudan to help equip schools with face masks, water and soap for regular washing of hands. As schools reopen, South Sudan's government is calling for continued support from non-governmental organizations for its health infrastructure. It wants to be as prepared as possible for a possible rise in cases due to schools reopening. Patrick Oyed, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
We now continue our special coverage, Amazing Xinjiang. Our CGTN reporter team has visited Tachang Prefecture and they're headed to the next stop, Shihezi City. Xinjiang is proactively working on its openness to the international community. Education is an ideal channel. As we mentioned, the CGTN team is due to arrive in Shihezi. But Zhao Yongfei got a head start and spoke to some foreign students at the university there about their experience.
Raza Adi and Aslam Khan are Shihezi University international students. Both are from India. They say they came to Xinjiang because the university here provides them with a well-disciplined academic environment, and the classes are in English. They speak limited Chinese, but language is not an issue when it comes to daily living.
It was very hard for us to communicate in marketplace whenever we go and ask them.
But Chinese people are very helpful for us, and they help.
They help us every time whenever
they try to understand us, not ignoring.
To help the students adapt to the campus, the university employs international teachers.
This is an excellent book.
Professor Azim Inayat is a veteran Pakistani faculty member at the School of Medicine. He's been employed here since 2002.
Or the person is coughing.
He helped build the program from scratch. Inayat says he's impressed by how fast the university has embraced the Western model of education.
It's too quick, I think, for a totally foreign type of, alien type of program being launched in a university, and it took us 4 years or 5 years and we were there. Why? Because infrastructure was already in place.
Inayat is now committed to quality control and making sure his program is competitive. The school has sent its alumni to top medical institutions around the globe. Inayat says Xinjiang's openness has helped lay the foundations for international education.
I'm not talking about only the physical development, look at the way the people live here. The people, they just don't survive. They live their life over here. They have been supported.
Besides teaching, Nta often visits student dorms to check up on their studies and life at school. He says he often encouraged them, telling them that what they've chosen will eventually pay off. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Shihezi, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region.
Let's now remind you of our top stories. An 18-month inquiry has found that 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes were a culmination of a series of horrific failures by Boeing and the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. A U.S. House panel report said there were faulty technical issues in Boeing's engineering, a lack of transparency on the part of Boeing's management, and insufficient oversight by regulators, the FAA. Leaders of the Economic Community of West African States have failed to reach an agreement with Malian military leaders over a transitional government. ECOWAS have been meeting in Ghana with the head of the military group that overthrew President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to persuade them to agree to their proposal. And the Egyptian Minister of Health, Hala Zayed, says Egypt will carry out clinical trials on a potential COVID-19 vaccine. The trials are based on an agreement signed with China. The vaccine candidate used for the trials was developed by Chinese company Sinopharm, CNBG. And that's a wrap up some of the top stories we've been following. Time now for our business segment. Over to you, Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Computer component makers around the world stand to lose billions of dollars due to China-US trade tensions. And passenger train services resume amid intensified COVID-19 regulations in Nigeria.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, computer component makers around the world are bracing themselves for billions of dollars in lost business as they become collateral damage in renewed China-US trade tensions. Expanded sanctions against Chinese telecom firm Huawei took effect on Tuesday, and this time its suppliers who have vital business interests in the US themselves are also being targeted. Here's Owen Fairclough with more.
The net is tightening even further around Huawei and now its suppliers. New US government sanctions aimed at starving the Chinese telecommunications giant of crucial components have taken effect. And it's not just Huawei being banned from using US semiconductors, chips, software and other technologies, but its suppliers too, unless they obtain a special license.
Huawei has become a byword for the trade and technology battle waged by the Trump administration against China. Washington claims, without offering evidence, that the company's equipment could be used for spying. And these latest restrictions have been applied to stop Huawei getting around existing sanctions by sourcing its components from third parties.
Huawei has constantly denied Washington's claims, but its future appears to be in Europe, opening 50 new stores across the continent by the end of this year. And if this latest ban drives Huawei out of the US completely, industry experts say computer chip and semiconductor manufacturers around the world also stand to lose billions of dollars. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Now, as Huawei works to overcome US pressure, it's looking to launch its own operating system, the HarmonyOS 2.0. Now, the software was first unveiled last year, but was not ready for commercial use. Last week, Huawei's consumer business CEO, Richard Nta, said it will be available on Huawei smartphones next year. HarmonyOS is designed for use across multiple devices, including watches, laptops, televisions, and even cars. Now, Huawei plans to launch a beta version to developers for smartphones in December. Unlike Android and iOS, HarmonyOS is based on a smaller and lighter microkernel, which is a piece of software that performs basic features of an operating system. This will allow seamless work across different devices, and of course its architecture can allocate system resources more efficiently by using real-time load analysis. In comparison, Android's mechanism treats all resources the same way, making for slower operation. Another difference, HarmonyOS can work on any of Huawei's devices, no matter its function. This will make things easier for developers who will be able to create an app just once and apply it across multiple devices. In contrast, Android and iOS release different operating systems for different types of devices. Well, let's move on now. Heading to Egypt, the country has issued a decree to private sector companies and state-owned corporations to install electronic payment terminals on site within the next 6 months. The directive is in line with the law that was passed by Parliament in 2019. It authorizes electronic payments in a bid to fight corruption and, of course, curb tax evasion. Here's Yasser Hakim with more details.
The Egyptian government is not looking back in its push to implement the e-payments law, which will require all payments to be made online. Already, all banks have established online sites and are urging clients to use the electronic service rather than going to the branches. Citizens have had the option to pay government bills, car license, fees, and similar services from home. But now cashless payments will be imposed on other sectors too.
At the beginning, electronic payments were optional, but slowly they were trying to make it an obligation. The first phase has been successfully tried over the last 3 years. The state issued ATM cards for all government employees to receive their salaries and pay bills. The second phase is to apply electronic payments in shops and all type of purchases and services. Online payment is slowly succeeding as you can now pay from your computer instead of standing in long queues to pay through cash. The third phase is the public and private sector entities. They are going online for internal transactions between them and with the public.
The government believes using the electronic system can help the state monitor the flow of money, and that will help it track money laundering, tax evasion, and illegal transactions. The Central Bank of Egypt has been adamant to apply these measures. This week, 26 car agencies in several cities have been closed down for receiving physical cash from the clients. However, millions of Egyptians, especially in the rural areas, do not have bank accounts and have never dealt with banks. Many also don't have access to strong internet.
There's an aggressive awareness campaign in rural areas to teach the simple grocery seller or housewife how to use these services and to provide bank accounts and ATM cards for them. Later, everyone will be forced to go online. The Ministry of Communication is also improving the internet infrastructure.
Still, there's been a positive reaction from citizens on the adoption of digitization of payment regulations.
It makes life easier and better. We can do a lot of things with it. I use the Visa in most of my purchases. I shop in the supermarket and on the internet and buy books, pay Uber rides and train tickets. It's safer than holding cash.
I used to work in the Gulf countries and all my bills and transactions were through the mobile phone, whether with public or private entities. I also don't need to go to banks, especially with the outbreak of COVID-19, so it's safer.
But it's not an easy process to migrate to a cashless community. A lot of challenges still remain, ranging from infrastructure, awareness, and implementation. The government says the process is going to be gradual and expects to take a few years to cover the whole North African country. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And in Nigeria, passenger train services have resumed across the country. Officials of the Railway Corporation say all the protocols required to prevent further spread of COVID-19 have been put in place. Well, our correspondent Fili Haza paid a visit to a train station in Abuja, the country's capital, and he brings us this report.
Nigeria's railway service is back in operation after being shut for nearly 5 months due to COVID-19. Officials say measures like temperature checks, use of face masks and enforcing physical distancing have been put in place to ensure safety of passengers.
The Nigerian Railway Corporation has been up and doing when it comes to observing the protocol set up by the NCDC in Nigeria, because we know that we need to protect the lives of our passengers at the train stations and on board the trains from the destination to from where they are taken off to their destination.
The Nigeria Railway Corporation halted services across the country in March. It shut stations like this one, which mainly caters for passengers commuting to and from the nation's capital Abuja and Kaduna State. Before lockdown ended last month, authorities decontaminated the entire train station, including the coaches and walkways. In addition, physical distancing foot signs had to be placed on the floor, and seats at the lounge were marked to help keep people 1 meter apart, as advised by health officials. And as passengers settle on the train, it's not business as usual.
These aren't the regular sitting arrangements for this couch. As part of measures to ensure people maintain physical distancing and stay safe from contracting the coronavirus, the sitting capacity of this train had to be reduced to about half.
However, this development comes with an extra cost of an additional 100% to the original fare. That hasn't gone down well with some passengers.
I do have a problem with the increase in the fare price for the train service. Of course, some of us, it's not a difficult thing to afford it. But if we as a government said we want to ease the mode of transportation for the majority of the poor people in Nigeria, I think the increase in price is not a good one.
The government can still do more for the people, you know. Not all the time the people have to pay the price for everything. Government can still look in good feet and say, okay, this thing, since it's happening this way, we can as well just make it like 50%. You get, instead of paying, the former was 1.3, now you're paying 2.6.
Authorities say the hike in price is required to help keep the train service running during this period of the pandemic.
You see, we have to make some little upward adjustment of the fares because of the social distancing. Since we have cut down the number of seats in the train, we have to do that so that we'll be able to sustain the train's operation.
The government says the increased fares are only temporary until the pandemic is over and trains can accommodate passengers at full capacity. It plans to ensure rail transportation remains open in order to boost economic activities across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, for the past 4 weeks, CGTN Digital Safari has taken you to Africa's wild in South Africa and the iconic Masai Mara in Kenya. Well, together, we've witnessed one of nature's most epic events, the wildebeest migration. And today, we highlight moments of our month-long adventure.
For the last 30 days, CGTN Digital Safari has taken you on a sunrise safari for 4 hours a day. There have been 17 different guides from the iconic Masai Mara in Kenya and 5 private reserves in South Africa. We have seen all the perils and promise the African wild has to offer. We followed the herds of zebra, wildebeest, topi and Thompson's gazelle on their way to partake in the Great Wildlife Migration, which is one of nature's most epic events, fueled by the lush red-oat grass plains on the other side. We've celebrated the survivors, mourned the fallen, but the herd's losses have been the predators' gain. For the carnivores of the Mara, their wait is well and truly over, with the migration having brought them a bounty. With the warmth of spring on the horizon, The predators further south have also flourished. The Pongwe pack made a stirring return to Djuma, immediately impacting their surroundings with their frenetic velocity. Kalamba has struggled to keep her kills, and hopefully she has learned that hoisting is the solution. However, some made more fun out of their meals than others. The ruby sands of Tswalu brought us precious mornings with the meerkats, along with many other residents who call this unique habitat their home. The copper tones of the rosetted residents perfectly complemented the dusty winter woodlands. The pachyderms have welcomed the start of the rains, relishing the return of puddles and pools. The last of the herds now trickle across the Mara River, and the greenery is beginning to bud in southern Africa. Things have started to settle, for now. The vast and varied wildernesses of Africa have delivered a month of magic, and it's been our pleasure to share it with you, all live on CGTN's Digital Safari.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Ghana's economic growth drops for the first time in nearly 40 years. Of course, we'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. We are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at that headline.